I never thought silence could feel like betrayal. But that day when I unlocked the door to my second home, it wasn't silence that greeted me. It was something else. Something breathing, unseen, yet heavy in the air. The place smelled different. Warmer. Not the cold, closed scent of a house untouched for months, but perfume. Sweet. Feminine. Expensive. It clung to the air like a secret waiting to be discovered. I froze at the doorway. My shoes sank slightly into the carpet I'd last vacuumed a year ago. The curtains were open, sunlight spilling across the living room. Someone had been here recently. I told myself maybe it was the cleaning lady. Maybe she'd aired the place out before showing it to potential renters. I wanted to believe that. God, I needed to believe that. But then I saw it. A half-finished glass of wine sat on the kitchen counter. Red. Still wet around the rim. And next to it, a lipstick-stained napkin. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The lipstick wasn't mine. The napkin smelled faintly of jasmine. My favorite scent, the one I'd stopped wearing after my husband died. It hit me like a memory I didn't ask for. The last time I was here was after the funeral. I'd cried in this very kitchen, holding that same wine bottle, promising myself I'd come back when life felt steady again. I never did. Till now. I walked slowly through the rooms. Every step echoed too loud, too alive. The house was supposed to be my sanctuary, a quiet place to breathe after years of loss and loneliness. But now the bedsheets were wrinkled. A man's watch lay on the nightstand upstairs. My cleaning lady never touched bedrooms. Called her. "Maria, did you come by this week?" "No, ma'am," she said, confused. "Not since last summer." "Why?" I hung up before I could answer. My heart was pounding too hard. I walked back into the living room. My reflection stared at me from the dusty mirror. Pale, older than I remembered, eyes full of questions. I tried to calm myself. Maybe Leah and Daniel had stayed here. My daughter had the keys. Maybe they came for a weekend getaway and forgot to tell me. That would explain the perfume, the wine, the laughter I thought I heard. But no, Leah's perfume was citrusy. Dark. This one was sweeter, younger. I touched the edge of the counter, grounding myself. The marble felt cold, indifferent. And then I heard it, the faintest creak from upstairs. I held my breath. My pulse thudded in my ears. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Instead, I found myself climbing the staircase, one slow step at a time, every board groaning under my weight. The sound came again, a soft shuffle, then a low murmur. A woman's voice. I froze outside the bedroom door. It was half open, sunlight spilling through the crack. I could see the edge of the bed, the white sheets, my white sheets. Shadows moved against them. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. I wished I was dreaming. Because the scene before me didn't belong in my life, in my home. A man's voice followed. Familiar. Too familiar. "Daniel. My son-in-law." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Daniel." Silence. Then chaos. The woman screamed, clutching the blanket to her chest. Daniel's face turned white, his mouth half open, searching for lies he could use. What are you doing here?" he stammered. Could barely speak. "This is my house," I said, my voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He looked at me the way guilty men look at their judges. Desperate, cornered, calculating. "Please," he whispered. "I can explain." But I didn't want explanations. I wanted to unsee. To erase. To wake up from this moment where everything I thought was stable cracked open in front of me. Then, before I could even move, the woman, wrapped in my bedsheet, turned toward him and hissed. "You told me she'd never find out." Her voice wasn't just a sound. It was a blade. And in that instant I realized. This wasn't an accident. Someone had planned to keep this secret. Someone close enough to know I wouldn't come here. My chest tightened as I stepped back into the hallway, gripping the railing to steady myself. Because deep down, I already knew who made sure I wouldn't find out. A woman's laughter echoed from upstairs. I wanted to scream, but the sound never came. It stayed lodged in my throat, heavy, sour, choking me from the inside. Daniel, my son-in-law, the man my daughter worshipped, the man who called me mom at family dinners, was standing half-naked in my bedroom. My bedroom, looking like guilt itself had taken human form. The woman beside him gasped, clutching the bedsheet to her chest. Her hair was messy, perfume thick in the air, the same one that had haunted me downstairs. She wasn't much older than Leah. I remember gripping the doorframe, the wood biting into my palm, just to keep myself from collapsing. "Mrs. Hart," he began. "Don't." My voice came out quiet, but it stopped him like a slap. "Don't say my name." He swallowed hard. "Please, it's not what it looks like." That sentence, "not what it looks like," I'd heard it once before. The day I found out my husband had been lying about his business debts. The same tone, the same fear. I stepped into the room. The floor creaked beneath me. My sheets, my pillows, my husband's old photographs still on the dresser. All of it violated, dirted by their presence. The woman turned away, clutching her purse. "You said this place was empty," she whispered. I didn't know she'd come," Daniel said quickly. His words tumbled over each other, desperate to build a lie before I could destroy him with the truth. "In my house," I repeated. My voice cracked on the word my. "You bring her here. You bring anyone here." He took a small step forward, hands trembling. "Please, just let me explain." Backed away. The smell of sweat and perfume made me dizzy. I felt like I was standing in someone else's life. Not mine. "Explain," I whispered. "Explain what, Daniel?" "That my daughter's husband is sleeping in her mother's bed." His jaw tightened. "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that." The woman spoke then, her tone dripping with irritation. "You told me she didn't come here anymore." He shot her a look, sharp and silent, like he wanted to erase her voice from the air. But she kept going. "You said she was old. That this house was yours now." Her words hit harder than any slap could. I turned to Daniel. He avoided my eyes. His silence told me everything. I wanted to tear the sheets off the bed, to throw them both out into the street, to scream loud enough for the whole world to hear what kind of man he really was. But instead I just stood there, numb. I thought of Leah, my beautiful, trusting daughter. How she looked at him like he hung the moon. How she told me, "Mom, Daniel makes me feel safe." That word burned through me. "Get out," I said finally. "Please," he begged, stepping closer. "If Leah finds out." "She will find out," I snapped. "And it won't be from your lies." He reached for me, maybe to plead, maybe to stop me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me." For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, but fear of losing control. The woman gathered her clothes quickly, mumbling under her breath. Her perfume filled the air again, suffocating, clinging to the walls. As she passed me, she glanced up and smiled. Not an apology. Not remorse. A smile of someone who just realized she wasn't the only liar in the room. Then she leaned closer, her breath brushing my ear. "She told me you'd never find out." Froze. "What did you say?" She just shrugged, sliding past me with the ease of someone who knew she'd already detonated a bomb. Daniel looked at me, panic flickering across his face. "Don't listen to her." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was hearing the echo of that woman's voice over and over again in my head. "She told me you'd never find out." Who was she? My heart pounded so hard it hurt. There was only one person who knew where I kept the keys. One person who'd said she'd never step foot in that house again. My daughter, Leah. I turned to Daniel slowly, my voice barely a whisper. What did she mean by that? He said nothing, just lowered his eyes, and that silence was louder than any confession. I stepped back toward the doorway, my hands shaking, my throat dry. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Downstairs, the half-finished wine glass waited for me like a cruel reminder. I didn't know what hurt more, Daniel's betrayal or the growing suspicion that my daughter already knew. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't care. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My pulse hadn't slowed since I left that house. My house, where Daniel had stood half naked with a stranger and a lie. But what haunted me wasn't the betrayal. It was the woman's voice. She told me you'd never find out. The words echoed louder than the car engine. I wanted to dismiss them, to pretend I'd misheard, but deep down my heart already knew who she was. Leah. My daughter. The image of her face, smiling, trusting, so in love with her perfect husband, kept flashing in my mind. I'd always envied her confidence, her certainty that life would never betray her the way it had betrayed me. I used to tell myself she'd done what I couldn't: marry well, build stability, escape struggle. But as I sat at the red light that day, all I could see was every time she defended him when I raised a concern. Daniel's just busy, Mom. He's not ignoring you, he's overwhelmed. Please stop worrying. You always expect the worst. Maybe I did expect the worst. 'Cause I'd lived it. When my husband died, I'd thought that pain was final, that no wound could cut deeper. I was wrong. Watching your child love a man who's already betrayed her cuts differently. Doesn't bleed. Corrodes. I parked in front of my house and sat there for a long time, staring at the reflection of my own tired eyes in the rearview mirror. I felt smaller than I had in years, like the world had quietly made a fool of me. Inside, the house was silent. Too silent. I dropped my purse on the couch and poured a glass of water, but even that felt wrong. The taste of betrayal lingers differently, like metal. I sat at the table, staring at the family photo on the wall. Leah in her wedding gown, Daniel beside her, his hand on her waist, his smile too polished. My smile beside them, so proud, so blind. I whispered to that photo, "What did he promise you, Leah?" The clock ticked. I remembered the way Daniel always offered to handle my house repairs. How he'd volunteered to check up on my second home when I traveled. How Leah once joked, "He loves that place more than our apartment." That wasn't a joke anymore. The nausea built until I had to get up. I paced the living room, heart pounding. The rational part of me wanted to call Leah immediately. The mother in me wanted to drive straight to her, shake her and ask, "Did you know?" But another voice, colder, sharper, told me to wait. If Leah was involved, she wouldn't tell me the truth. Not yet. So instead I went to my laptop. My late husband had insisted on installing security cameras in all our properties. Old habits from his corporate paranoia. I'd never paid much attention to them since he passed, but that night, I logged into the system for the first time in months. The feed took a few minutes to load. My hands trembled as I typed the password. When the first image appeared, my breath caught in my throat. There they were. Daniel and the same woman, entering the house, laughing, carrying groceries, acting like they belonged. I clicked through the dates, week after week, month after month. Sometimes the woman arrived alone. Sometimes Daniel joined later. They were comfortable, routine, practiced. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a second life, second home for them. And then, just when I thought I'd seen enough, something else appeared in one of the older clips. Leah's car. She had been there. My hand flew to my mouth. She'd parked outside for a few minutes, then left. No knock on the door. No confrontation. She knew. I sat frozen, tears burning my eyes, as realization sank in. My daughter hadn't been betrayed. She'd been participating in the silence. She told me you'd never find out. Now it made sense. And if she knew about the affair, what else had she been hiding? I scrolled through the footage again, my heart twisting tighter with every image, every visit, every lie. Every time Daniel had walked through those doors, with her blessing. And that's when I knew, my daughter's perfect marriage wasn't built on love. It was built on secrets. I didn't sleep that night. The footage kept replaying in my head. Their hands, their laughter, the way Daniel kissed that woman like he'd done it 100 times before. But it wasn't just him that haunted me. It was Leah's face, her proud smile, her words about having a perfect marriage. I had to know the truth. By morning, I was pacing my living room, clutching my phone like it could burn a hole in my hand. I dialed her number 3 times before she finally picked up. Mom! She sounded cheerful, distracted, like she was in the middle of brunch with angels. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. We need to talk. Now. When she arrived, she looked flawless. Silk blouse, manicured nails, the scent of money and comfort. I hated how calm she was, how untouched by the storm brewing inside me. Leah, I began, my voice trembling. Were you at the lake house recently? She blinked. No, why? That lie hit me like a slap. My own daughter lying so easily, so beautifully. I almost envied her composure. Almost. There's something you need to see. I set the tablet on the table and pressed play. The footage filled the screen. Daniel, shirtless, tangled in sheets that once smelled like lavender and peace. A woman's hand brushed across his chest. Leah froze. Her smile dissolved like sugar in boiling water. Mom! She whispered, her tone sharp and defensive. Don't call me that right now. My voice cracked. Tell me you didn't know. For a long moment she said nothing. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator, cold and constant. Then she laughed. Softly, bitterly. Mom, you must have misunderstood, she said, waving her hand as if brushing off dust. Maybe those are Daniel's friends. He lets them use the place sometimes. I stared at her in disbelief. Friends. In my bed. Drinking my wine. My voice rose with every word. Leah, I saw his face. I saw her face. Her eyes flickered. Fear. Shame. I couldn't tell. But then a smirk. Teeny. Cruel. You're overreacting as usual, she muttered. You always make everything dramatic. That broke something in me. All the years I'd sacrificed for her. The nights I stayed up sewing her school dresses, the money I scraped together for her wedding, they all twisted inside me like knives. You think this is about drama? I said quietly. This is about betrayal. In my home. By my own family. Leah's hands trembled now. I could see it, the small twitch she used to get as a child when she was caught lying. I leaned closer, searching her face for honesty, but what I found was fear. Finally I slid the tablet closer. Look again, Leah. That's him. That's your husband. And that's not some friend. She looked, really looked, and I saw her mask crumble. Her lips quivered, eyes glistening. Then a whisper so soft I almost missed it. Mom, please. Please don't ruin this for me. The words hit me harder than any truth could. Don't ruin this for her. I stared at her, numb. Ruin what, Leah? Asked. Your marriage. Or your lie. Her breathing quickened. Tears welled, but not from guilt, from desperation. You don't understand, she said, voice breaking. I can't lose him. I can't go back. Back to what? Pressed. Leah turned away, clutching her arms like she was holding herself together. Her reflection shimmered in the window, the image of a woman trapped by her own choices. I know what he's done, she said at last. I've known for a long time. The room tilted. My heart clenched. You knew. She nodded slowly, her voice hollow. I made a deal, Mom. Daniel promised me everything. The house, the lifestyle, the investments. He said if I kept quiet, I'd never have to worry again. I stepped back, stunned. The daughter I thought I'd raised, honest, loving, strong, was a stranger standing in front of me. Tears blurred my vision. You sold your dignity for comfort. Leah's lips quivered. I sold it for survival. Her words hung heavy in the air, cold, metallic, final. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to ask what kind of survival meant sleeping beside a man who betrayed her in her mother's bed. But instead I just whispered, what did he promise you that was worth your soul? Leah turned then, slowly, trembling, and whispered something that shattered the last illusion I had of her. He promised me I'd inherit everything after you're gone. Cliffhanger, next chapter. The mother begins to uncover the deeper conspiracy. I thought I'd already heard the worst. I thought Leah's deal with Daniel was the lowest point a daughter could sink to. But I was wrong. What came next? tore something inside me that may never heal again. She sat there, head bowed, the same way she used to when she'd broken a vase as a child. Only this time it wasn't a vase. It was everything good I'd ever believed about her. "I've known for months," she said quietly. The words came out like blades, slicing the air between us. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard. But her voice didn't tremble. It was steady, practiced, resigned. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew he was cheating and you did nothing." Leah nodded, eyes glistening. "He told me he needed space sometimes. That it helped him think." I didn't ask questions. I stared at her, disbelief burning through me like fire. "So you let him use my house for that?" She looked up then, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Mom, you don't understand," she said. "I didn't want to lose him." Those words hit harder than the confession itself. My daughter, the girl I raised to be fierce, independent, proud, was begging for scraps of love from a man who disrespected her. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Even the air seemed to recoil from her admission. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, as I tried to process what she'd just told me. "You allowed it?" I finally asked, my voice breaking. "You let him bring another woman into my home, into your marriage, because you didn't want to lose him?" Leah wiped at her tears, her hands trembling. "You think it's easy, Mom. You think it's black and white. You always had this idea that strength means walking away. But sometimes strength is staying." I almost laughed, not out of humor but out of pure disbelief. "Staying," I said softly. "Staying with a man who lies to you, uses you, cheats on you? That's not strength, Leah. That's surrender." Her face hardened. "You don't get it. You had Dad. You had someone who loved you. I don't have that. All I have is Daniel, and I'm not going to let him go just because he's complicated." The word complicated made me flinch. I looked at her, my daughter so polished, so put together, and realized she'd built her entire identity around appearances, around the illusion of being the perfect couple. I thought of her wedding day, how she'd glowed under the string lights, how Daniel had kissed her like she was a trophy, not a person. I'd ignored the unease in my gut then. I told myself she was happy. I'd been wrong. "Leah," I said quietly, "you're living in denial. You're protecting a man who doesn't care if you break." She shook her head, angry tears spilling down her cheeks. "You think you know everything, don't you? You think your version of love is the only one that matters. But you don't see what's really going on." "Then tell me," I demanded. "Tell me what's really going on, because from where I stand, it looks like you're just his shield." Leah hesitated. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes darted to the window, then back to me, as if deciding whether she could trust me with the truth. "He said it's not serious," she whispered finally. "That it's just something he needs. That he'll stop when he's ready." I felt my stomach turn. "Something he needs. Leah, he's destroying you." "No, Mom," she said, shaking her head. "He promised me. He said once things settle down, once he's done with her, he'll focus on us again." Froze. The words didn't make sense. Her. Leah's face went pale like she'd said too much. She bit her lip, eyes wide with panic. "Who are you talking about, Leah?" I pressed, my voice trembling. "Who is she?" She looked away, clutching her necklace, the one Daniel had given her last Christmas. I could see her chest rising and falling, her breathing shallow, erratic. "Leah," I said again more firmly. "Who is he going to divorce?" Her silence was unbearable. My heart pounded against my ribs. I could almost hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then she whispered, barely audible. "He promised he'll divorce her soon." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Divorce who?" I repeated, but my voice was just a whisper now. Leah's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with a strange mix of pity and fear, not for herself but for me. And in that instant I realized something was horribly wrong. Because the way she looked at me, it wasn't the look of a daughter protecting her husband. It was the look of someone guarding a truth too dark to speak. "Leah," I whispered, my throat dry. "What did you just say?" She stood up, backing away slowly, shaking her head as tears spilled freely. "Mom, you don't want to know." But I did. I needed to. Because somewhere deep down I already sensed the answer. And it was going to change everything. Cliffhanger next chapter. The mother discovers who her really is, and it's not what she expects. I couldn't sleep. Not after Leah's trembling voice, not after the way she said, "He promised he'll divorce her soon." Those words crawled into my head and refused to leave. I needed to know who she was. So I did what any betrayed mother would do. I went looking. Days turned into restless nights spent scrolling through social media, bank records, real estate listings. I wanted to believe Leah's story, but deep down, I already knew Daniel was capable of far more deceit than either of us wanted to admit. And then I found her. Her name was Nadia Karim, 28 years old, a makeup artist who sometimes worked with wedding photographers. The irony didn't escape me. Her profile was full of filtered smiles and scenic getaways. The same vacations Leah had boasted about not long ago. It was her. The woman from my house. I stared at her photo for hours, my finger trembling above her face on the screen. She looked kind. Live. Nothing like the villain I'd built in my mind. That made it worse. The next morning, I drove to the small salon where she worked. My heart thudded as I watched her through the glass window, tying her apron, laughing with a coworker. She looked like any other young woman trying to make a living. When I finally walked in, she greeted me with a polite smile. "Hi, how can I help you?" I hesitated, then said softly, "I think we need to talk about Daniel." Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by suspicion. "Who are you?" "I'm his mother-in-law," I said. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her eyes widened, and she took a step back like I'd just revealed a ghost standing between us. "You're lying," she whispered. "I wish I were." We sat in the back room of the salon, surrounded by half-used hair products and the low hum of dryers. I could see her hands trembling as she pulled out her phone, scrolling frantically. She showed me a photo, Daniel and her at a resort, arms wrapped around each other. "He told me you and Leah cut him off," she said. "That she moved abroad. That the house was his inheritance." Inheritance. The word burned. "That house," I said slowly, "belonged to me and my late husband. It's not Daniel's anything." Nadia's jaw dropped. "But he said it was in his name. He even showed me papers." I let out a bitter laugh. "Forged, probably. He's been using my home to play family while lying to both of you." Her expression shifted from shock to rage. She stood up, pacing the narrow room. "I thought he was honest with me," she said. "He said Leah had cheated first. That's why they separated. He said you didn't approve of us because I wasn't rich enough." I felt my stomach twist. Every lie Daniel had spun was crafted to control the narrative, to make him the victim and everyone else the villain. "I didn't even know about you until last week," I said quietly. She looked at me, eyes full of tears. "Then, he's been lying to both of us." I nodded, fighting the lump in my throat. "I think he's been lying to everyone." The room fell silent again. I could hear distant laughter from the salon floor, life going on as if our worlds hadn't just collapsed. Then Nadia whispered, almost to herself, "He said he'd buy us a new place soon. Somewhere private. He said he'd already sold one of your paintings to help pay for it." My blood ran cold. I felt the ground tilt beneath me as her words sank in. "My paintings," said slowly. "From the house." She nodded. "Yes. He said one sold for a lot, enough to take me to Dubai next month." For a moment I couldn't speak. Those paintings weren't just art. They were my husband's, the last pieces he'd painted before he died. He'd sold them, stolen from me, lied to Leah, lied to Nadia. Daniel hadn't just betrayed our trust. He'd robbed our history. I stood abruptly, my breath shaking. Thank you, Nadia. You've told me everything I needed to know. She looked at me, frightened. What are you going to do? I met her eyes, feeling something cold and certain settle in my chest. I'm going to take back everything he stole. I left the salon without another word, the sun glaring against the windshield as I drove away. But as I reached the main road, a thought hit me like a knife. If Daniel had access to the house and the paintings, then he still had my spare keys, and God knows what else. And when I checked my phone that evening, a new notification confirmed my worst fear. A transaction from my account. Thousands withdrawn. Cliffhanger. Nadia's words echoed in my mind. He said the house was his inheritance. But what if he was trying to make it true? I'd been robbed before. Of trust, of peace, of illusions. But this was different. This was my husband's memory, stripped from the walls we built together. The moment Nadia told me about the paintings, I drove straight to the second home. The house stood quiet, too quiet, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun like cold, blind eyes. My keys shook as I unlocked the door, half hoping I was wrong. But the second I stepped inside, the silence felt heavier than before, hollow, as if something sacred had been ripped away. I walked into the living room. The scent of turpentine and old canvas that once clung to my husband's paintings was gone. The walls were bare, pale rectangles marking where they used to hang. Every stroke of his brush, every hour he'd spent pouring his soul into those canvases, stolen. My breath hitched. I moved from room to room, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Drawers open, cabinets empty, jewelry boxes overturned. The bedroom closet, half cleaned, half ransacked. It looked like someone had been methodically erasing me. He didn't just take things. He took memories. My husband's cufflinks, the ones Leah had said were too old-fashioned. Gone. The silver watch he'd left for me, gone. Even the small framed photo from our 25th anniversary. Missing. I sank to my knees beside the dresser, shaking. For years I'd believed Leah's marriage to Daniel was built on love, not convenience. But now I saw the truth. He'd chosen her because of me. Because I had something he wanted. I could almost hear his voice from the day of their engagement. I'll take care of her, Mrs. Reed. You won't have to worry about your daughter ever again. The arrogance in his smile then now made my stomach churn. I stood up, trembling with fury. You took care of her all right, I muttered to myself. By bleeding her dry. My grief slowly hardened into something sharp, something dangerous. I opened the last drawer, the one where I kept old letters, property files, and bank documents. For a moment I hesitated. It was the only place I hadn't checked. The handle felt icy against my palm. Inside, the drawer looked disturbingly organized, not ransacked like the rest. Papers stacked neatly. Too neatly. My pulse quickened. I pulled them out, one by one, until I saw it. An official document with my signature, forged. At the top, bold and clear. Transfer of ownership. The property, my second home, transferred to Daniel Morgan. Froze. My eyes darted across the page, tracing every line, every signature, every date. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. The notary stamp, too, looked fresh. The transfer date was just a week ago. My throat went dry. I whispered into the empty room. No, 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 no. He'd done it. He'd stolen my husband's paintings, my jewelry, and now my home. All while pretending to be the devoted son-in-law. I gripped the edge of the drawer, the papers fluttering in my shaking hands. A part of me wanted to scream, to tear the walls down. Another part, the colder, quieter one, began to think. If Daniel had gone this far, how much deeper did his plan go? Was Leah part of it? Or had he deceived her too? The questions circled my mind like vultures. I pressed my hand to my chest, forcing myself to breathe. The woman I'd been, gentle, forgiving, was gone. The woman who stood there now was ready for war. I folded the forged papers carefully, tucking them into my bag. Evidence. Proof. The beginning of my revenge. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Eyes red, jaw clenched, face hollow but alive with a fire I hadn't felt in years. He thought I was weak, that I'd stay quiet, that I'd let him win. He was wrong. But as I reached for the door, something on the floor caught my eye. An envelope, half hidden beneath the rug. I bent down, picking it up. Inside were more documents, contracts, bank transfers. And at the top, one name that made my blood run cold. Leah Morgan. Cliffhanger. My daughter's name was on every forged document, signed not once but several times. I kept my voice low because I wanted them to underestimate me, to believe the quiet woman in their living room had nothing left to lose. I didn't scream. I didn't storm. Plan. After the discovery, I swallowed the knot of anger and walked into my lawyer's office like a woman arranging flowers. He looked up over his glasses. "You're sure?" he asked. He nodded. "Freeze the accounts. Reverse the transfers. And don't alert them yet." He did as I asked. Paperwork moved silently. Injunctions, notices, legal seals that felt like armor. The transfer was reversed before Daniel knew the ground had shifted. My pulse slowed for the first time in weeks. Then I watched. Surveillance footage, bank statements, emails. I compiled everything into a neat, irrefutable pile. Every lie, every visit, every forged signature. It was clinical work, surgical in its precision. Revenge, I decided, would not be loud. It would be exact. I planned the dinner because I wanted them to see me as I always had been. Reasonable, forgiving, the matriarch who kept peace at her table. I wanted them to believe nothing had changed while the truth sat on the plates between them. The dining room smelled of lemon and roast chicken, a small comfort against the storm I carried. I set the table with my good china, lit candles, folded napkins the way I used to. The house looked ordinary. Deceit carried its own shadows. Daniel arrived first, confidence radiating like cologne. He shook my hand too firmly, smiled at Leah like a man who had rehearsed charm. Leah came minutes later, quieter, eyes darting, hands twisting the hem of her dress when she sat. The tension was a living thing tucked between the silverware. Conversation was small. Weather, work, the neighbor's puppy. Daniel talked too much, anchoring himself with jokes. Leah answered in short sentences, each reply a brittle shell that barely held her together. I listened. I watched their faces like a woman reading a book she once loved and found torn pages. Every laugh Daniel forced scraped at my nerves. Every time Leah reached for his hand and hesitated, I catalogued it. For dessert I served lemon tart, tart and clean like the truth I intended to deliver. I took my time, letting the sweetness sit heavy in the room before I moved. "Before we finish," I said, my voice steady, "I have something I need to show you." Daniel's smile faltered. Leah's fork stopped mid-air. The candles flickered. I stood and walked to the end of the table. The leather folder felt cool beneath my palm. Inside were photocopies of every document, every transfer, every email, arranged in chronological order. I could see Daniel's jaw tighten. Leah's eyes widened, a rawness I had only glimpsed once before when she was small. "No theatrics," I told them. "Just facts." I slid the folder across the table. Its edges scraped softly against the wood. They looked through the pages, faces draining color as each proof laid itself bare. Daniel's fingers twitched. "This is a forgery," I said. "An illegal transfer. Your name is on papers that are not yours to have." I met his eyes without flinching. "We reversed it." "You're lying," he spat. Leah covered her mouth, trembling. "Mom, don't," I cut in. "Not yet." He tried charm. He tried anger. He tried pleading. None of it worked. We had walls now, legal, immovable, precise. I watched them panic. Watched the slow unspooling of a man who had thought himself untouchable. Daniel's face changed from confident to raw to hollow with a speed that made my chest hurt. Then I did the quietest thing I could do to end him. I slid a single, original property paper across the table. Not a copy. The one with my husband's embossed seal. The one that had been stolen from my drawer. Their silence became a confession that filled the room. A slow, heavy settling of truth that felt irreversible, like a door closing on everything they had pretended. "This house," I said, voice low and certain, "belongs to me. Not your lies." He went from charming to dangerous in a single breath. One second he was calling me Mom, the next he was slamming his fist on my table. I didn't flinch. I'd spent too many nights trembling in silence to give him that satisfaction now. He tried every trick. The same charm that had fooled my daughter. The same soft tone that once made me believe he loved this family. "Let's not make this ugly," he said, smiling like a man bargaining with a gun behind his back. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. Leah sat beside him, motionless, her fork still on the plate, tears pooling but never falling. She looked lost, like a child realizing too late that the monster she feared slept beside her. My phone rested beneath the napkin, its red light blinking faintly. I was recording everything, every word, every threat, every crack in his mask. When I told him the accounts were frozen, his voice sharpened. "You think you can destroy me?" he hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You already did that yourself." The air between us turned thick, almost metallic. The candles flickered, shadows slicing his face into fragments. He looked less like a man and more like something cornered. Eyes wide, breath ragged, mask slipping piece by piece. Leah finally whispered, "Daniel, stop." But he didn't hear her. His anger had become its own language, and it was speaking louder than love ever had. He stood, pacing, muttering about reputation and misunderstanding. He said the lawyers were liars, that I'd been manipulated. Every word sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced excuses for years. I only said, "The police will decide." That's when his confidence cracked. He froze like the word police had pierced something deep inside him. The color drained from his face. He turned toward Leah, desperate now. "Tell her, Leah. Tell her we're fine. That you love me." But Leah just stared at her hands, trembling. "I thought I did," she whispered. Something broke in him then, a flicker of rage, then defeat. He left that night in silence, slamming the door so hard that the candles blew out. 2 days later my lawyer called. His voice was calm, practiced, but I could hear the satisfaction buried beneath it. "It's done," he said. "He's been arrested. Fraud, identity falsification, property theft, we have everything." I thanked him quietly and hung up. I should have felt relief, triumph even. But all I felt was exhaustion, like I'd been holding my breath for months and now wasn't sure how to breathe again. I watched the news that evening, the screen filled with Daniel's photograph. His perfect smile, the same one that used to charm us all, now looked hollow, almost mocking. Reporters called it a high-stakes real estate fraud scandal. For me it was just Tuesday. Leah didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. I assumed she was hiding, shattered by the man she'd chosen over her own mother. Part of me pitied her. Another part of me waited, because I knew grief often turns to blame. The house was quiet again, too quiet. I could still smell the faint trace of Daniel's cologne on the dining chairs. I wanted it gone, burned, scrubbed, erased. But revenge never feels as clean as you think. It leaves residue like ash on your skin. I sat by the window that night, looking out at the dark garden. Rain hit the glass, soft but relentless. I wondered if Leah would ever forgive me, or if she'd see me as the woman who destroyed her husband. Then a knock. Sharp. Urgent. When I opened the door, Leah stood there, soaked, shaking, her mascara smeared across her face. She fell into my arms before I could say a word. "He's gone," she sobbed. I held her, confused. "I know, sweetheart. They arrested him." But she pulled back, eyes wide with something that wasn't grief. It was terror. "No, Mom," she whispered. "Not that. He escaped." I thought I had no tears left. But when Leah collapsed in my arms that night, sobbing like a child, something inside me cracked open again. Something I'd buried years ago. She was trembling so hard I could feel it through my bones. Rainwater dripped from her hair, pooling at our feet. I guided her inside, wrapped a blanket around her, and watched her crumble onto the couch like a doll missing its strings. "Mom, I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Her voice was raw, the kind that comes only after months of pretending. I wanted to be angry, to tell her she'd chosen this path, that I'd warned her. But the words died on my tongue. All I saw was my little girl, terrified, heartbroken, and still defending the man who destroyed us. I sat beside her in silence. The clock ticked, loud enough to fill the space between us. "He promised he'd change," she said, her eyes glassy. "He said the affair was over, that he'd make it right." That word, promised, felt like a knife. How many promises had I once believed myself? My late husband, her father. His lies weren't so different. Different names, same cycle of hope and ruin. "You can't save someone who doesn't want saving, Leah," I said quietly. "You can love them, but that won't make them honest." She shook her head, pressing her palms to her face. "I thought I could fix him." Her voice broke on that last word. Vic. That was the curse we both carried, loving men like they were projects instead of people. The storm outside deepened. Thunder rolled, low and distant, like the world itself was mourning with her. I stood to make tea, something warm to hold on to, but my hands trembled so badly the cups clinked against each other. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Where she'd been, how she'd found out, whether Daniel had hurt her. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the only kindness left. After a long pause, she looked at me, eyes swollen and red. "You must hate me," she said. "I don't," I whispered. "I hate what he made you believe." She buried her face into her knees, sobbing harder. I wanted to hold her, but a part of me hesitated. Every time I tried to protect her, she'd run back to him. I couldn't go through that again. But then I remembered, she had no one left now. The man she'd chosen over her mother was gone, exposed, dangerous. The friends who envied her marriage would now whisper behind her back. No, I was still here, the last person she could run to. I sat beside her again and placed my hand over hers. Her fingers were ice cold. "I should have listened," she said, her voice barely audible. "You warned me so many times." I swallowed hard. We all ignore warnings when love feels louder. That made her look up. For the first time in years, she didn't look like a woman defending her pride. She looked like the little girl who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares. She leaned into me, whispering, "He took everything, Mom. The money, the trust, the love. And I let him." I felt a sharp ache in my chest. She wasn't just confessing, she was breaking apart, piece by piece, right in front of me. "I thought I could build a life," she said through her tears. "I thought I was lucky." I brushed her hair back, my fingers shaking. "You still can, Leah. You just have to stop letting his shadow live in you." For a moment she nodded. A small, fragile movement. The storm had softened outside, replaced by steady rain tapping against the windows. It almost felt peaceful until she spoke again. "Mom," she whispered, eyes lowering to her lap. "There's something else." My stomach tightened. The tone in her voice was too calm, too rehearsed. The way someone speaks before confessing a sin they've practiced saying aloud. "What is it?" "Yes." She took a long breath, her hands trembling against the blanket. "I didn't tell you before because I thought he'd change. Because I thought if I just stayed quiet long enough, he'd come back to me." "Leah," I said softly, "whatever it is, you can tell me." She looked up, eyes wide, glistening, full of a different kind of fear now. Her lips parted, and her voice came out small, broken, almost a whisper. "Mom, I'm pregnant." The world seemed to stop, the rain, the clock, even my heartbeat. And all I could think was, he's gone, but he's still inside her life. When Leah told me she was pregnant, my anger didn't vanish. It simply changed shape. It became quieter, heavier, like grief with a heartbeat. For days, I couldn't decide what hurt more, the betrayal she'd lived through, or the truth that she was still carrying a piece of him inside her. Every time I looked at her, I saw both the innocent child she once was and the broken woman she'd become. She slept in my guest room for a week, barely eating, barely speaking. I'd hear her crying at night, muffled, fragile sobs that made me press my hand over my chest, as if I could stop my heart from cracking. I knew I couldn't punish her for his sins. But forgiveness, that was something else entirely. One morning I found her in the kitchen making tea. Her hands were steady for the first time in weeks. "Mom," she said quietly, "I'm ready to move out. I need to start over." Her voice was trembling, but there was strength in it, the kind that comes only after falling hard. He nodded. "You'll need help." She shook her head. "Just a little. Not much. But I helped anyway. I couldn't send her into the world alone, not like this." I called a friend from real estate and found her a small apartment not far from mine. Old building, modest rent, sunlight through the kitchen window. Place where she could breathe again. When we signed the papers, she looked at me and whispered, "I don't deserve this." I sighed. "Maybe not. But the baby does." For a second she almost smiled. Then tears welled up again. "Thank you, Mom." I reached across the table and held her hand. "Don't thank me. Just, don't make me regret it." I could tell she understood. There was no defiance left in her, no stubborn insistence that love excuses everything. She had finally seen what love without respect turns into: dust, debt, and sleepless nights. I helped her move her things out of that cursed house. Box by box, memory by memory. The rooms felt colder than ever. Daniel's scent lingered in the curtains, his laughter echoing faintly in the walls. I'd once imagined that house filled with grandchildren's voices. Now it was just silence and dust again. That night, Leah came by with homemade soup, her way of saying goodbye. We sat at the table, steam rising between us. "I saw his name on the news again," she said softly. "They said he's trying to get bail." I nodded, my face unreadable. "He won't get it." Her eyes lifted to mine. "Did you?" "I refused," I said. "You can forgive him if you want." "I won't." She bit her lip, and for a moment I saw guilt flicker across her face. But she didn't argue. She just whispered, "Some lessons are meant to hurt." "Yes," I replied, "and some men are meant to stay gone." We didn't speak for a while after that. The rain started again outside, soft but steady. Leah eventually stood, hugged me, and left. Her footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the ache in my chest. I walked to the window and watched her car disappear into the street. A strange calm settled over me. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not joy, not closure, just a quieter kind of pain. Still, I couldn't help wondering if Daniel would ever try to contact her again. He had a way of slipping through cracks, of twisting sympathy into power. I didn't have to wait long for the answer. A few days later I went to check my mail. Among the bills and advertisements was a thick, folded envelope with my name written in ink I recognized instantly. Sharp, deliberate, arrogant. It was from the prison. My hands froze. The paper trembled between my fingers as I stared at the return address. Daniel White. Inmate number 74453. For a long moment, I just stood there at the mailbox, the late afternoon sun burning against my face. I should have thrown it away, burned it, pretended it never came. But instead, I slid my thumb under the seal, my breath shallow, my heart pounding like it had the day I first found him in my house. Whatever he had written inside, I knew it would change everything again. I almost didn't open it. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for hours, staring back at me like a wound that refused to close. I told myself it didn't matter, that Daniel's words couldn't reach me anymore. But curiosity has a cruel way of clawing through even the strongest silence. When I finally unfolded the paper, his handwriting hit me like a familiar slap. Sharp, arrogant, controlled, the same way he used to talk even when lying. The letter was short, almost too short. "You destroyed everything. Leah will never forgive you. I loved her, but you made sure she'd hate me. You always wanted control, and now you have it. But remember this. You can't save her from what's coming. You were always stronger than the rest of us. I read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession without remorse. Every line reeked of the same manipulation that had poisoned our lives. But that last sentence, "You were always stronger than the rest of us," settled deep inside me. For the first time, Daniel had said something true. I sat there in silence, my fingers trembling over the ink, feeling both anger and a strange, haunting pity. He wasn't writing from love or regret. He was writing from fear. Fear of irrelevance, fear of the woman he could no longer control. Outside, the afternoon light was fading. Shadows stretched across the walls of my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd once taught Leah to bake cookies. The same space where I'd cried after my husband's death. Now it held another kind of memory. Survival. I took the letter to the backyard. The air was cool, carrying that faint autumn scent of dying leaves. I placed the paper inside a small metal bowl, struck a match and watched it burn. The flames curled the edges first, then swallowed his words whole, one bitter sentence at a time. The ink melted into smoke, lifting into the darkening sky like a final ghost leaving my life. I whispered, "Goodbye," not to him but to the part of me that still needed answers. As the last ember died, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness but release. Later that night, I drove to the second house. I hadn't stepped inside since the night of the confrontation. The driveway was overgrown now, the porch light long dead. My reflection stared back at me in the dark window. Older, lonelier but somehow lighter. When I unlocked the door, the air inside was still thick with memories. The faint scent of wine. The whisper of laughter that wasn't mine. And beneath it all, silence. Clean, sharp, honest. I walked through every room slowly. The walls no longer felt like witnesses. They felt like scars finally healing. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and found one of Daniel's forgotten shirts. For a moment, I almost laughed. The arrogance of leaving something behind, as if he'd ever return. I threw it into a trash bag, sealing it shut. Then I did what I should have done months ago. I locked every window, closed every curtain, turned off the lights. Finally, I stood by the front door with the keys in my hand, cold metal pressing into my palm. This house had seen too much. Betrayal, weakness, rage, revelation. It was where I'd lost my trust, and where I'd found my strength. I turned the key in the lock one final time and whispered, "It's over." But as I stepped away, I realized something important. I didn't want to sell it. Didn't want to erase it from my life. Because this house, the one that had once broken me, was now proof that I'd survived. So I kept it. Not as a home. Not as a wound. But as a reminder. A reminder that silence can be louder than revenge. That walking away, unshaken, is sometimes the most powerful way to speak. As I looked back one last time, the moonlight touched the windows softly, and for the first time in years I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I was finally free.